Um, for tonight's lecture and of course tomorrow's lecture, inshallah, I want to finish the series on the fourth Imam's contribution after Karbala. And I have dealt with al-Sahifa, al-Sajjadiyyah. So today and tomorrow we'll be focusing on Risalat al-Huquq, the Treatise of Rights, which was expressed in the 7th century. And to be honest, this lecture is about the state of the world, the meaning of human dignity and human rights, especially in accordance with our dear fourth Imam. And my question is this, that if we regard Risalat al-Huquq, which I'll explain as an important work, if we regard the leadership of the fourth Imam after Karbala as important, we have to say, or we have to ask, how have we used what he has left us for the betterment and reformation of the Muslim ummah and the wider international society? How have we used his thoughts and his understanding of dignity and rights to reform many of the problems that we face today, such as wars or neglect of children, for example, or problems between Muslim sects? Here the fourth Imam is relevant. Why is he relevant? He lived in a society where the rights of his family members and the women were neglected, where the rights of orphans were neglected, where a ruler was permitted, basically, or he felt that he could, drink and abuse the society and neglect people's rights. He lived at a time when, for example, in Kufa, people were threatened, their lives were threatened, their properties were threatened, their money was threatened if they ever supported Al-Hussein alayhi salam. That means they did not have a basic freedom of speech. Al-Hussein alayhi salam was not even granted a fair trial. Today, as I said, if we have a problem, we will go to court. Al-Hussein alayhi salam never was even granted the basic concept or basic ability. You can go to court and we will hear your thoughts or your grievances. Even the ability we have today of forming this center, which is known as the right of association and assembly, which again we may take for granted. I mean, if we want, we build a mosque, we'll hold Muharram and Safar programs. It was not like that back then during Karbala and after Karbala. When we talk about the contribution of our dear Bibi Zaynab salamullahi alayha and Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala both of these great figures formed assemblies, which we now call majalis. Okay? Both of these figures formed associations or religious associations, but they were all underground. It was not like the freedom we have today. So my question always is, how did they do it? And second, what vision did they have in their minds in order to awaken people not to follow Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and also to forgive their enemies and to make society stable? Now, we only have to switch on the news and we see what is happening in Syria, in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain. We even see what is happening in localities. Like in United Kingdom, I'm sure you heard, there was the known as the Woolwich murder, where someone, of course, went to stab a apparent soldier, claiming that this soldier, should be killed because he is a threat to the whole Muslim ummah. So this person who killed the guy took it upon himself to say, well, I am going to be granted Jannah and I'm going to kill this innocent man. Now, this is a local problem I'm telling you about, okay? Then you have problem, of course, of Wahhabis, of trying to denigrate Shias, for example. You have problems of rights around the world, rights of women in certain Muslim countries. And even with the Shia and Sunni, for example, we all know that, generally speaking, we're not very united, and we generally don't work together. Muslims, Christians, and Jews, whilst we are known as Ahlul Kitab, again, we do not know how to work together or make active steps in working together. But look at the fourth Imam. The fourth Imam had some of these troubles, but he managed to produce works which awakened people intellectually and gave them the confidence to say, actually, this is our society. Sometimes you say, well, this is a Saudi Arabian problem. This is a Sunni problem. We don't have to get involved. This is wars happening around the world. It's nothing to do with us. We are Shia. It's okay. I mean, we've got a different identity. It's easy to say that, and a Sunni may say the same thing, for example. There is that mentality. there is also a mentality of saying, well, we can't do anything. What can we do? I mean, we say, okay, we have to help Bahraini people, or we have to help people in Pakistan. Well, what can we do? It's a fundamental question. Do we give funds? Do we write letters to the government? Do we become politicians ourselves? Do we become journalists? All of these answers might be right, and all of these answers might be limited. The reason I'm giving you this question is still today, Risalat al-Huquq has remained dormant, meaning that it has just remained there. Our Muslim scholars, Shia and Sunni, and Western scholars have not even used this work in order to produce a template for the way in which the Muslim ummah can reform themselves, and also a way in which we have a human rights legislation that stems from our fourth Imam, which can also awaken the minds of Western scholars who also view human rights in a particular way. So what I'm saying is for us, but also for wider society. I'm putting the fourth Imam in a very universal perspective. Salawat. Before we go on to Risalat al-Huquq, we have to understand what we mean by this concept of human dignity and how the fourth Imam gave this concept to the society. Now, you all, I'm sure, know that if, for example, a brother or sister insults you, you won't like it. You'll say, my dignity has been harmed. You have insulted my respect. You have insulted my honor. Okay? If today, for example, somebody denies you the freedom of speech, you're not allowed to speak this. You're not allowed to have this opinion. You'll say, my honor is threatened. You're taking my right away. Human dignity today means that. It means your worth and your honor in society, which no government and no state and no human being, regardless of whatever power they have, can take it away from you. Nobody has a right to do that. If you want to speak, you can speak, okay? Of course, within a decorum, within a respected environment. But nobody has the right to take away basic rights from you. Dignity was not always like that within the Western society. Dignity, coming from dignitas, did not mean honor or worth. It meant dignity associated with your status and class in society. First class, or second, or third class. Or if you are a doctor, for example, or you are a king, then you have a greater dignity than this poor person, or lay person, or somebody that is of a working class. Now, we would like to think that, I'm just giving an example of United Kingdom, or Canada, or America, for example, at least the basic notion that we shouldn't be divided into classes has gone. At least the basic notion that even a woman has a basic right is also there. Now you can say, well, it's not perfect, etc. Fine, no problem. But I'm just giving you an insight that dignity has evolved, where today, if a woman wants to go to university and work, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, it's no problem. It wasn't always like that, as we know, okay? The second thing about the Western concept of dignity is that it is also related to freedom. Okay? Now it means that every human being has autonomy. So if a woman wants to abort her baby, she can do so in the Western, for example, society, and you know that. In certain European countries, if you want to perform euthanasia, you can do it. If you want to voluntarily die, you can do it, and somebody can help you, assisted suicide, okay? What I'm trying to tell you is that what is happening within society is that a human being has a certain freedom and responsibility and moral decision-making power which makes him human over animals, for example, or over other types of creation. We have this dignity. Now, I can't go into the positives and negatives of Western dignity, but I'm just giving you a framework because I'm now going to introduce the Islamic concept of dignity. What is the Islamic concept of dignity? Actually, we have not developed it to a high degree yet. There's still a lot of discussions about it. But we have a basic ethos. And it is scholars often cite the following verses which I'm going to give you. For example, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, this is in Surah Al-Bani Israel, verse 70. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبِرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. Okay? Certainly, we have honored the children of Adam, and carried them over the land and the sea, and provided them with all of the good things, and given them an advantage over many of those that we have created with a complete preference. Okay? Now there are other verses I can cite, but this verse neatly encapsulates that Allah purposefully gave us a sense of honor and made us excel over other types of creation. What does it mean? It means today, I can't just go around killing people. I can't go around insulting your honor. Why? Because you are an equal creature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just like me. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is superior. That should obviously or help us stop egos and pride. Okay? I do not have a right to claim superiority over you, and you don't have a right over me. Okay? It therefore means we have a basic respect for each other. What it also shows is that from the line of Adam, we are, if you like, vicegerents on this earth. We are there to look after this earth, which was given as an amana, as a trust to us. That is why we don't have a right to corrupt the earth or do bloodshed. Why was the Prophet so focused on stopping tribal warfare? Because it was a basic corruption of society and human life. That's not the way you deal with problems. You deal with problems by sitting down, discussing with the person. What is your problem? You don't go and kill the person. Okay? This is the first problem that he had to encounter. So you can imagine that going back to the Prophet's time, he had a vision of society. A very progressive vision, by the way. He saw society was here, he wanted to get to all the way here. But we know that the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not leave us with so many laws. Some family laws, some inheritance laws, and criminal laws. And of course, we would say that the Imams left us further laws. Even then you can say, we don't, for example, have a hadith on modern legal situations or on modern science and technology, so what do? That's why human dignity becomes important. We have to have a vision of human dignity. Where do we want society to go? It's up to us. If we have a concept saying, right, every human being deserves an honor, okay? We want to elevate the rights of human beings. We want to show the mercy of the Prophet in this society. We want to honor the justice of Hussein alayhi salam. How do we do it? We can't say, oh, it's not our problem. Or we can say, well, we have Western laws governing it, it's fine. We can say we have Muslim pieces of legislation. But I tell you, is that enough? Do you feel that Muslim pieces of legislation and international human rights legislation is absolutely successful in preventing bloodshed and in giving rights to all? Do we still have child labor in factories from where we buy our fashion and clothes? Okay? In the Islamic tradition, for example, if you want to compensate for your missed or qadha fast, you can free a slave. If you find a slave today and you have a qadha fast, you can free that slave and your fast would be compensated for. Now, this might make us feel rather uncomfortable. That means, do we believe in slavery? Today, Shia and Sunnis have not prohibited slavery within the Islamic tradition. It is not prohibited. If today I go and find a slave, I can go and compensate for my missed fast. Now you might say, well, what's happening? Either we believe in slavery and we accept slavery as part of the Islamic tradition, or we have the progressive vision of the Prophet and say, I cannot stand to see even my mother being treated like that, so how can I see a child being a slave? We have to have that feeling and heart like the Prophet did. Now you can see that even fiqh has to develop. All human rights have to develop. We're all in the same boat because we're trying to make society better. Even, for example, although I'll give more examples, within, for example, relationship between Shia and Sunnis, for example. Again, there is some tension. We accuse each other of certain things. It happens, as we know. We have to be honest about it. Some Shias may curse Sahaba, some Sunnis may curse Shia, etc. And it goes on and on and on. Now we have to think, is that the society that the Prophet wanted us to live in? Or should we be forgiving? Should we try to reform? Should we try to present a vision to the whole of humanity to show we are better than this and we are following the model of our dear Prophet? These are the questions that, inshallah, the fourth Imam can answer. Salawat. So the Islamic concept of human dignity basically is a sense of honor, just like in the Western concept. It should be, we haven't got there yet, but should be a progressive concept. We should try to have a vision of what we want of human dignity. But one thing very interesting about the Islamic tradition is two things, which I think are very beautiful. The fourth Imam says at the beginning of Risalat al-Huquq, he says, the greatest of rights against us is Allah's right, because Allah has created us. It's a very beautiful beginning of Risalat al-Huquq. I might say I have a dignity as Imranali. I can say that. I have a dignity as a human being. But still, I must acknowledge the source of my creation, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The full dignity and the full power and full respect lies with none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fourth Imam is establishing this spiritual and creational relationship between Allah and the human being, which in the Western dignity is not there. Okay? Number two, the concept of the soul, the nafs, also translated as the self, is also very important. Let me narrate you a hadith by Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And this is reported in Ghurad al-Hikam. He says, the nafs is like a precious jewel. Whoever strives for its protection, it will help him attain exalted positions. And whoever acts negligently in its protection, it shall pull him towards humiliation. It's very beautiful. What it means is our nafs is like a jewel. We are to look after that jewel. We are to adorn that jewel, like a woman would do. A woman brings out her jewelry to the detriment of the man on the kushali. Man loses money. The woman is very proud. This is my jewelry. Why does she look after it? Because if she keeps it there and ignores it, you wouldn't want to wear that jewelry. It's a very beautiful majaz or metaphor that Imam Ali has. He says, look, you have a jewel inside of you, but that jewel is on display 24/7. If you see me, okay, you know if I'm being false. You can tell. You know if I'm being a hypocrite. You know if I'm lying to you. You can say, this guy, I'm not sure about his intention. Human beings can suss that from each other. Why? Fortunately or unfortunately, Allah has created us with intuition. I can intuitively think, right, I can see what's happening here. Look, I can see your faces. I know who's concentrating. I know who's not. I'm not trying to put pressure on you. But what I'm saying, I can say who doesn't like the majalis, for example. I can see that. You don't need to hide that from me. Even if you try to hide it, you'll fail. Okay? It's, really. We are very transparent people because that's the way insaniyat is. You can see each other. So Imam Ali says, look, if you have this jewel inside of you, then polish it. Polish your akhlaq. Polish your honor and dignity. Don't let yourself down. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't go insulting people. Have good akhlaq because it is always on display. Right? So what is very beautiful about the Islamic tradition, which is not always there within the Western tradition, is we believe that the soul carries that honor. That's a very beautiful concept. And that is why I said that every man or woman, slave or no slave, they have a nafs, don't they? So we should respect that nafs. That is why both fiqh, both human rights has to be progressive in that manner. Now we come to the issue of the fourth Imam. If we believe that dignity is important, let's say, some of you may disagree, but let's say we all agree, we do believe in respecting the rights of all human beings. How do we do it? What have Muslims accomplished in the 21st century to give dignity and rights to the rest of their Muslim society and also wider society? Let me quote to you where we have reached. That is, majority of Muslim states, if not all, participated in what was known as the Organization of Islamic Conference. They created a piece of legislation called the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam of 1990. Okay? Now, why did they create this? This I'm talking about doesn't matter whether you're Shia or Sunni here. We're all part of this, because if you go to a Muslim country and some legal dispute occurs, whether we like it or not, we have to abide by international law. In this country, whether we might have our own fiqh, that is fine. But today, if I run a red traffic light, or I go and sue somebody or insult somebody, They will take me to the court and I will be governed by Canadian laws, right? So whether we like it or not, we are governed by international law, by international norms. So we cannot just say, well, this is not our problem. That's why I'm giving this legislation. Where have Muslims reached? I'm going to read out certain paragraphs of this legislation. My humble argument is it is very, very limited, and that is why I want to bring in Risalat al-Huquq, okay? But alhamdulillah, fine, it is something that we have, but just judge it for yourself. This is what it says in the preamble. Reaffirming the civilizing and historical role of the Islamic ummah, which Allah made as the best community, and which gave humanity a universal and well-balanced civilization in which there was harmony, in which knowledge is combined with faith, and to fulfill the expectations from this community, it is there to guide all of humanity that is confused because of different and conflicting beliefs and ideologies, and to provide solutions for all chronic problems of this materialistic civilization. Just think about that. Let us analyze that. This is our top, premier, first class piece of legislation, okay? Just think about it. It says that Allah made the Islamic ummah the best community which gave humanity a universal civilization. Did it? Did it really do that? Think about it. After the death of our dear Prophet, whilst you and I might respect and believe in the justice of our first Imam, there was also a khilafah, okay? Now, whatever you say, between 632 to 656, you found the most military expeditions and political conflicts, because the early Khulafa, whilst they may have been concerned with the moral status of the community, fine, but they were also concerned about expanding the Islamic empire. Imam Ali alayhi salam was not interested in fighting. He was a pacifist. He did not want to fight. Why in the Battle of Khaybar, when that knight spat on our dear first Imam, he did not immediately become vengeful. He walked away, and then he came back and struck the sword, not with vengeance, but with justice. Why would he swallow his anger? He was not there, he's not interested in killing people. He was interested in reforming people. But this is our history. So we have military expeditions. You look at Umayyad and Abbasid Khalifat. You look at Muawiyah and Yazid ibn Muawiyah. You look at the Abbasids. What they were interested in? They were interested in oppression, okay? Then you also look at Ottoman Empire, for example, which was started to collapse by mid-17th century, okay? Therefore, look at this piece of legislation. We seem to be rather confident, don't we, saying that the Islamic ummah was the best ummah. Yeah, maybe Imam Ali, maybe certain scientists and philosophers who made contribution, nobody's denying that. But to say that it gave humanity everything, I would question that. Second is that it says that humanity is confused and there are problems of materialistic civilization. How many of us have the latest phones and iPads? How many of us has 50-inch TV in our rooms? Are we materialistic? Maybe. So are we also the problem? When it says that another civilization is materialistic, we have to look at ourselves. And when it says humanity is confused, I'd rather live in Canada or UK than a Muslim country. Wouldn't you? Because we know that there is some procedure and a queue. Yes, the concept of a queue, a line. Yes, when you go in a supermarket or you buy something, people here understand the concept of a queue and a line. Muslim countries don't even understand that concept. So which civilization are we talking about here? We have to be very honest with ourselves. You look at majority of Muslim ummah, we have not developed elaborate legal systems and moral systems that you and I would say, right, I'm going on holiday to Bahrain. Yeah, really. So this is what I mean. We would not say that because we are not confident in our own vision of dignity. This is what I said. When I said we have not prohibited slavery, it means we don't actually understand what we mean. We haven't developed it yet. This is where we are. Let me read you one or two other things. It says that all of the rights in this legislation will be judged in accordance with the Islamic Sharia. What is the Islamic Sharia? There is Shia Sharia, Sunni Sharia, Wahhabi Sharia, and even within that there are differences of opinion. And even within that there are different Maraja, for example, and different Sunni scholars. And what happens when the state abuses the Sharia and decides to oppress the rights of human beings, like in Bahrain, for example? What then? So Sharia is not perfect. Sharia is, or I should say, Sharia may be perfect, but our fiqh always needs to evolve. Sharia, we say, is God's will or God's path or path to a water stream. We would like to say we are following this path, of course, but we're always evolving and developing. And let me read you just one or two more. This is Article 9. The seeking of knowledge is an obligation. Provision of education is the duty of the society and the state. The state shall ensure that there will always be means to acquire education for the benefit of Islam and the benefit of mankind. So what's the best university you can think of? Is it a Muslim university? In our community centers, do we have the best educational processes? Does the Majalis always promote education? So that means this piece of legislation is telling the world that Muslims are going to give the best education. And you and I know, and I've been to university, so I know, what will your son and daughter do? I'm going to King's College, I'm going to McMaster University, I'm going to Yale, that's it. So this is our state. Look at Article 10, which is one of the worst. Islam is the religion of true unspoiled nature. It is prohibited to exercise any form of pressure on man or to exploit his poverty or ignorance in order to force him to change his religion to another religion or atheism. What it means is, as a Muslim, nobody can force me to, for example, become a Christian or an atheist. Fine. What happens if somebody is forced to become a Muslim? What happens if we are forcing people? What happens, for example, in this center or other centers, we are forcing people for one opinion? What then? Are we liable for that? The legislation does not even go into that. And we know, yes, some people are forced in Islam, and some people leave Islam because they are forced. And I don't need to tell you, la ikraha fi din, etc. We know that this was not the way of the Prophet. Now, why have I said this to you? I've said this to you because this is our premier legislation, but you can see it has weaknesses. There might be some positive points. Let us now bring in our dear fourth Imam. In the fourth Imam society, he had some similar problems. Okay? People were denied rights, denied freedom of expression, etc. How did he tackle it? Let me read to you some rights so you can, inshallah, see this. The first thing that he says in Risalat al-Huquq, but I'm going to deal with that tomorrow, so I'm only going to give you an insight. He said, look, every human being has a spiritual dignity. What's a spiritual dignity? It's known as Huququn Nafs, okay, in Risalat al-Huquq. It means I owe a right to my hand and my tongue and my stomach and my private part and my legs. Before I do anything in society, I must respect the rights of these organs, which means that every human being has an internal sense of this honor, of respecting this nafs. When we say, you know, people often ask lecturers and all this, that, oh, well, how do I become spiritual? How do I not do bad habits and all these things? There's an answer here. He's giving this idea that there is a spiritual dignity for every man and woman, which is not there, by the way, within Western legislation. I'll expand on that tomorrow, but I'm just giving you that insight. Number two, he says that once you have understood that, you have a right which you owe to your close members of the society, like your mother and father, like your womb relatives, and even your neighbors. Let me give the example here. He says, the right of your neighbor is that you guard him when he is absent, you honor him when he is present, and aid him when he is wronged. You do not pursue anything of his that is shameful. And if you know of any evil of him, you conceal it. Don't bring it out in the open. Okay? If you know that he will accept your counsel, you counsel him, and you do not forsake him in difficulty. That means you help him. You release him from his stumble, you forgive his sins, and you associate with him generously. Now, is that the way we treat our neighbors, for example? Who are our neighbors? You can say on our street. But neighbors here is without qualification. There is no specification here. That means Muslim or non-Muslim. Number two, when we talk about Muslim ummah, who are our neighbors? They are our fellow brothers and sisters. If there is an evil thing which my fellow Muslim brothers have done, it's not my right to go and expose that. Unless it is a case of justice for the society, fine, I can expose it. Look at what he's trying to do. You might have this insular mentality, the fourth Imam is saying. He's telling society, you might dislike your neighbor. You might be of a different sect. He might be your enemy. But what do? You honor him in his absence. You know what the sixth Imam alayhi salam said, and this is reported in Tuhaf al-Uqul. I'll try to remember the hadith. He said, if the killer of Amir al-Mu'mineen came to me and wanted to deposit money with me, or wanted to give me something in amana or trust, I will and would have honored that trust. Look at what the sixth Imam is saying. That means when there is a chance to reform your neighbor, you do it. You don't keep degrading him or degrade yourself. This is his vision of dignity, progressive all of the time. Not this kind of thing, well, we can't join hands with Sunnis or any other sects because they're like, no. If we are followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, if we truly are, then we do exactly what Imam Hussain alayhi salam did to Hur. Hur comes, doesn't he? And he says, oh Hussein, I was the one that stopped you in your tracks. Can you ever forgive me? What does Abu Abdullah say? He says, oh Hur, I forgive you and Allah forgives you. And now today we commemorate his shahada. That is the mentality and vision we have to have. This is why I'm bringing the fourth Imam. He had a universal vision. One or two other rights. Before I conclude, this is about leadership. The fourth Imam says, the right of your subjects through authority is that you, the leader, should know that they have been made subjects through their weakness and your strength. Hence, it is incumbent upon you to act with justice towards them and be like a compassionate father. You should forgive them in their ignorance and don't be hurried to punish them. And you should thank God for the power over that which He has given you. Leadership is not something to chase for. Leadership is a test, one. Number two, I'm only here, look, I'm giving you an example. Why am I giving this lecture? I will learn from you. I'm giving this lecture because I have studied something. My studies are small, my knowledge is small. But what is the fourth Imam saying? If I am a leader here by giving a lecture, it's only because all of you may not have had those qualifications or capabilities. So he's saying, me, that is me, I have to be like a compassionate father with you. A leader of this community or any community has to behave like a compassionate father to his people. The leader of Bahrain, the leader of Saudi Arabia, the leader of Canada has to behave like a compassionate father towards his people. Now today, how will we do elections in a community center or any society? We will take votes. Somebody will give a speech. You will air your manifesto. Say, I want to become leader, I want to serve the community. My niyat is very sincere. MashaAllah. No problem. Right? What happens then? What happens if you notice, my God, this leader is not right. He's a bit insincere. Or you look at Rob Ford, for example. Okay? All of these things, right? What do? Look at what the fourth Imam is saying. He's providing us with a mechanism by which a leader understands that at the root of his responsibility is compassion and forgiveness. And therefore, if we are to become leaders, we should go through a spiritual process or remind ourselves, or leaders should remind themselves of this right, so that when a conflict or dispute occurs, there is compassion shown. And if you want to know the intellectual beauty, this is how the right is analyzed. A leader must reflect on his position as spiritual exercise. He must act like a compassionate father, that is ethics. He is a leader by virtue of the subjects' weaknesses and has a duty to them. That is law, okay, that is duty. And he must thank Allah, this is theology. Where do you find the mix of spirituality, law, ethics and theology in legislation? You'll be hard pressed to find it. In Risalat al-Huquq, he combines all of these things. The final right before I conclude, this is the right of salah. The fourth Imam even gives dignity to our furu'id-din. Can you believe it? We always say, how am I going to concentrate on my salah, etc. Look at what the fourth Imam did when he was praying salah. This is how he viewed salah. He says, the right of your salah is that you know it is an arrival before Allah and that through it you are standing before Him. When you know that, then you should stand lowly vile, beseeching, trembling, hopeful, fearful, and abased in front of Allah. And you will magnify Allah with your stillness and dignity. When I abase myself, I magnify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I'm creating a polar opposite. You will approach the prayer with your heart, and you will perform it according to its bounds and its rights. This is very important. One, because first of all, we would like to know how to perform a good prayer. He's telling us. He's telling us what makes a good prayer is not the amount of mustahab things that you recite, not the amount that you prolong the salah. These are all secondary things. You may pray the most shortest salah in the world, but if your body is still and your heart is abased, your salat is accepted, because you are magnifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what we should teach our children in madrasa. With the ahkam of salah comes the, if you like, the etiquette of the salah as well. But what does it also show if you want to talk about dignity of society? I want to give you an honest experience here. This happened to me about year and a half ago in university. I went to the prayer room, okay, and there were a few Shia brothers there, and we said, let's pray Jamaat Namaz, okay? So, I don't particularly care about position of Jamaat and all this, so I said, please brother, why don't you lead, etc. So he says, no brother, you lead. So, in the end I said, fine, I'll do it, no problem. So we decided to lead. We saw two other brothers come in the university prayer room. We figured they were Sunni, all right, no problem. We said, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? He said, look, we're praying Jamaat, would you like to join us? He said, yes, no problem. As soon as I put my turba down, okay, and they saw that, they split the Jamaat. So those 2-3 brothers split from the Jamaat, and literally a few meters, like we have this carpet here, just few meters, they prayed their own Jamaat while we were praying Jamaat, okay? I didn't say anything, all right? Afterwards, I confronted them, okay? We sat down with them, I said, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? I said, brothers, we're waiting for you. We waited 5 minutes so that you, our brothers, could join us. Why did you leave? He says, because we saw that you were Shia, and we have been told that our Jamaat will not be accepted by you, okay? So I said, no, this is all incorrect. I said that we are all brothers here. Even if you accept that, even if you believe that by praying with me that your Jamaat is not accepted, do you think it's respectful to start another Jamaat in the space of a few meters? And what happens if I were to say that to you? What happens if I have to say, well, you know what, I don't really like you, and I think you as a Sunni make my namaz invalid, so I'm not going to pray with you. What happens if I did that? Would you like that? I said, you come and you expect people to join you. But why should I join you, for example? Okay? He then understood, but I said it in a very polite kind of manner, okay? The point I'm trying to illustrate to you is at various levels. With Shia and Sunni, we have not even got over this fact, both within our fiqh and both within our ethics, that we do not even give respect to the salat. We are more interested in looking at the fiqh of the salat and using that as a principle by which the salat can be accepted. Is that the way laws should be derived? What did Ayatollah Khomeini say? And my elders here would be able to inform you, because I was not born, but I read history, of course. What did Ayatollah Khomeini say? He says, we are fighting which way to pray, that our hands are like this or like this, but the enemy will cut off our hands regardless. This is what Ayatollah Khomeini said. And as you know, Shia scholars at that time also opposed him, poor guy, okay? But what he did was very noble, okay? Now imagine what I'm trying to give you. The fourth Imam has a spiritual approach to law, which both our Muslim scholars and non-Muslim scholars have not caught on to. If we are to reform society, we have to have an extremely progressive vision that is harmonious, that is elevating people's rights, not living in the same slumber by doing exactly the same that the other is doing. What's the difference then of commemorating Karbala? Karbala is about progression. So we have to be practical. It's lovely to say that we have honor. It's lovely to say that everybody should follow Imam Hussein. Well, why? Why should he? What are we giving humanity? You tell me. Are we first in science? Are we first in technology? Are we first in law? If today we say, why don't other people follow Hussein alayhi salam? Why? Well, they are looking and they say, well, okay, fine, this is a very tragic event, but I want to know how this Hussein alayhi salam is relevant to society. Give me something practical. Then I will follow. We have to put our practical caps on in order that Risalat al-Huquq can become, this is my argument, can become a template for a kind of Muslim international law for even our communities and our fiqh, so that it begins to elevate our Muslim ummah and even wider humanity. Salawat. Inshallah, tomorrow I will continue this topic of Risalat al-Huquq, inshallah. Can we dim the lights? Thank you. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Brothers and sisters, on the 12th of Muharram, the heads of the martyrs were placed on top of spears and were brought into Kufa. If you remember of the last couple of days, the women were crying in the tents and they could not bear to see these beheaded bodies. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was so weak that even were he to turn to look at the bodies, for the chain would cut him. Now as they approach Kufa, look at the scene. A reporter narrates that I was returning to Kufa after performing Hajj. Celebrations were taking place in the city. I inquired, why are people celebrating? Somebody told me, these outlaws and rebels have been captured. Who are these rebels and outlaws? As he walked among the crowds, he saw the severed head of Imam Hussein raised on the end of a spear. His grief choked him. This is the propaganda against the family of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Imam Sajjad was tied to an unsaddled camel. His thighs were severely bruised and bleeding. And this person saw the women being taken as captives. O people of Kufa, cast your glances away from us, Kulthum says. Do you have no shame from Allah and His Messenger that you look at us, that you look at our bare heads? Somebody said, who is this woman speaking? He said, she is Kulthum, daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Lady Kulthum, in despair, she started to wail and she said, what will you answer if the Prophet were to ask you? What have you done while you were the last of the nations to my progeny after my death? From them are captives and others are covered with blood. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, look at these people and what they are doing to us. Indeed, I fear that a curse will come upon you and you will get the azab of the previous nations. Another reporter from the roof said, which captives are you? Kulthum and the women said, we are the lowly, abased captives of Muhammad. Look at us. This woman had some mercy and she tried to give them some garments to cover their heads. Finally, Imam Sajjad turned to them and said, you lament and cry for our sake. Then inform me, who are the ones that have killed us? Where were you when you should have supported al-Hussein alayhi salam? Lady Kulthum also says, you killed my defenseless brother, my Hussein. Sorrow be to your mothers and you will burn in the heat of the fire. You have spilled the blood that Allah has prohibited from spilling. The men and women of Kufa, when they heard these words, brothers and sisters, they started to cry. They started to beat their chests. They started to beat their chests. They started to rip off their garments. They started to bite their fingernails. What had they done? And finally, one of the persons who was looking, and he had not known what was happened, he saw a spear being brought in. He recognized that face. And you know whose head and face that was? It was the beheaded face of Aba Abdullah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matam al-Hussein. Ya Hussein.